So I just watched Blood Origin, a new Witcher miniseries on Netflix, and a prequel to the primary show, as well as the Witcher books, I suppose. And it's the first piece of Netflix Witcher media to get such bad reviews. Audience reviews might be lower than expected due to the drama surrounding the departure of Henry Cavill, but critics rate it lower as well. So, is it as bad as they say? Well, it's not great. I don't think it's much worse than Season 2 in terms of committing crimes against the lore and the spirit of the books and all that, but it is certainly worse in other regards. One of the things I praised in Season 2 was the seemingly improved production value. Better costumes, better armor, better sets, improved CGI, and so on. Meanwhile, we are headed in the opposite direction here. Some of the CGI, especially, is notably bad for current day standards. The castle where the royal elves live, for example, looked kind of blurry and low-res, and possibly the worst example, which I will censor slightly to avoid spoilers this early into the video, is a character who slightly transforms towards the end, and it looks like his body is turning into a plastic suit. So, I don't know, perhaps they dropped the budget on this one, but some of the CGI was really bad. And I'm usually not one to care too much about that sort of thing. Now, beyond the computer-generated stuff, the world was quite generic. The elves, for example, who are the vast majority of the population, look and speak and behave exactly like humans do more than 1,000 years later. Despite originating from different worlds, having much longer lifespans, coexisting with other races, having an affinity for magic and so on, and I'm not saying that all elves should be like Elrond and Galadriel, but there should have been a more significant difference, especially here where the action takes place before the conjunction of the spheres. You know, before elves and humans could homogenize.
You've chosen well.
Additionally, the elves were essentially doing the same thing to the dwarves that the humans are doing to the elves in the present day. The dwarves used to be the wiser, ancient civilization who eventually got pushed aside and suppressed by the elves. They took their knowledge and ancient artifacts and perverted them and so on. And speaking of that, Netflix has a fetish for these monoliths. They keep making them more and more relevant, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the spoilers. But first let me mention a few more general things, such as the writing.
Damn it.
It's not great either. Some people called me a baby and whatnot for criticizing Season 2's overuse of swear words, but I shall do it again here.
What the fuck is that?
We're fucked.
Dead. Like fuck.
Because I think it adds basically nothing to the already mundane plot and rather shallow characters, which is a shame because I thought the cast of actors was rather solid. Sadly, many of them played characters that were not terribly interesting. There's a scene where the male lead tells the female lead how awesome she is, while all he's good at is killing people. And I'm like, yeah, that's about right. He's a big, strong man with a big axe, and he's good? They tried going a little deeper with the lead female, where she was supposed to be this almost a folk legend who inspires people through her song in dark times and all that, which on paper is quite interesting, but I wasn't really sold on the execution. My favorite character was definitely Mel, the dwarf lady who talks to her hammer. I would really like to see more of her, probably learn a little extra information about the dwarves in general, because it seems they're trying to make them more interesting. And speaking of that, there may actually be Blood Origin Season 2. I mean, with ratings like these, I'm not sure, but they did leave many questions unanswered. Which brings me to the next point, that this show is not a terribly good prequel. If you read the books, for example, and felt like some of the lore and timelines need to be expanded and fleshed out some more, you won't get any of that from watching Blood Origin, because it changes and retcons so much for so little reason, they may as well have made it into a completely different IP. And if you've only experienced The Witcher from the Netflix products, which you shouldn't, but if you have, Blood Origin will answer some of your questions, but it will also add an extra layer of confusion because it's not terribly consistent with what Netflix themselves have been showing us. So before I get into the spoilers, is this show worth watching? Well, if you've watched Season 2 and plan on watching Season 3, you might as well watch this one. It certainly feels cheap at times, but overall I wouldn't say it's significantly worse. While watching it, I think I realized that I no longer care that much. I think something broke within me during Season 2, and so now when they've turned the deeply mysterious cosmic calamity that was the conjunction of the spheres into greedy elves altering time and space with the help of ancient dwarven agricultural devices, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go with that. But I feel like Season 3 will be the last Witcher thing I watch on Netflix. I've already lost the desire to review each episode separately, and I might lose the desire to watch them as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about spoilers a little. I suppose I already spoiled the fact that the elves themselves initiated the conjunction of the spheres through manipulation of the monoliths. And when I said that they used dwarven agricultural devices, I think that is more or less true, that they did explain the monoliths as things that dwarves buried to make the soil fertile, I believe.
Because our ancients buried them to bring fertile bounty to the land.
So how on earth were they turned into extra-dimensional portals? I have no idea. My guess is that Netflix wanted to create this great irony where the supposedly advanced civilization, that is the elves, is unable to see the simple purpose of the monoliths, and so they can't use them the way they are meant to be used, but instead they choose to corrupt them and use them to invade and conquer other worlds and take their lands, all under the guise of bringing order and civilization to them and so on. But the elves were not really portrayed as this powerful civilization at all. They didn't seem to have enough of an army to deal with a tiny rebellion. And how were they planning on civilizing other worlds when they themselves lived as squabbling tribes and clans? I already suspected from Season 2 that they will essentially remove the Elle and present them instead as part of the normal elves. But I think they should have at least kept some of their lore intact. You know, that which made them into a formidable civilization, capable of actual conquest. And yes, originally the Elle were not the ones who caused the conjunction of the spheres, but since Netflix replaced the local elves of old with some of the Elle characters, such as Avallac'h and Eredin, it would have been nice if they kept their other properties too. You know, make them wise and powerful and cunning and strong and tall. Instead, they're just regular gay elves. Now, I guess it's possible that the stranded Eredin, in the end, reunited with Avallac'h, and together they created a new order of elves with mages capable of advanced gene manipulation and time traveling, and they fought sentient unicorns and grew tall. But based on the post-credit scene, I don't think that's what's happening. And still, it begs the question, what did Eredin do for 1,200 years between donning the mask and showing up to chase Ciri? I hope it's something worth watching if they decide to ever tell that story. Okay, what else do we talk about? Should probably mention the making of the first Witcher. There is a case here where Netflix is making stuff up as they go. We have 3 pieces of Witcher media coming one after the other, namely the Vesemir anime, followed by Season 2, and now followed by Blood Origin. All 3 delve into the origins of the Witchers, and all 3 sort of contradict one another. The Vesemir anime established the sect of mages who alone have the alchemical and magical knowledge to make Witchers. They all died, and while they were alive, there were never any mentions of elves or elder blood or Fainwed being involved in the process. Then Season 2 comes out, and suddenly Vesemir knows that the key to making Witchers is the Elder Blood, and all he needs is a vial of Ciri's blood and a few words from Triss, who by the way has no idea of what those other mages were doing, and we can have new Witchers for generations to come. Also keep in mind that according to Season 2, the Elder Blood itself is the ingredient, while the Fainwed flower is a sign that the blood is of the right type. And then comes Blood Origin, where they make the first Witcher. This happens before Elder Blood even exists. So they quickly changed their mind, and now it's the flower that is one of the ingredients and not the blood.
There are Fainwood flowers in this cave.
In fact, it is implied that the flower is what turns the blood into Elder Blood, because the child of this Witcher, and yes, he can have children apparently, is likely to be Lara Dorren, or at least one of her ancestors. So why don't all Witchers have Elder Blood? Was this the only one that was made this way? And also, why has everyone in the future forgotten that you can make Witchers from the flower and not just from the Elder Blood? I mean, if the Elder Blood spawns the flower, wouldn't they at least try?
Only grows one place, where Elder Blood has spilled.
Especially if the result would have been a Witcher who is capable of having children. Also, how is he able to have children exactly? He seems to be the most monstrous of all Witchers genetically, the furthest away from being human or elf, but precisely he is able to have children? Shouldn't it be the opposite? I don't know. Also, I think it's rather weird that neither of the progenitors of the Elder Blood gene has the distinct ashen hair or green eyes. Again, it's possible that their child went through some kind of genetic manipulation, which changed the way he or she looks, but still I find it a needless change. Okay, let's mention something good. Like I said, the cast of main characters seemed charismatic enough, which helped with keeping my attention throughout the show. Michelle Yeoh, if that's how you pronounce the name, had some good fight scenes. Another thing I was curious about is who the Goddess of Chaos is. You know, the entity that the Elven Mage was conversing and dealing with?
You want to be a god amongst elves?
Yes.
Could it have been the historian Odim who saved Dandelion?
I need you to sing a story back to life.
I suppose it's possible. And speaking of Dandelion, we'll have to wait until Season 3 to find out if he actually does something with the story he learned. It was supposed to inspire the downtrodden elves, but I guess a lot of it can be used to show that their ancestors were no better than the humans who mistreat them today. Also, based on the ending of Season 2 and the post-credits scene here, we should get both Avallac'h and Eredin involved in the next season. So I think Blood Origin made me a tiny bit more curious about Season 3, and I hope something good comes out of it. Because as I mentioned before, I think I'm getting to the point where I don't really want to watch the Netflix Witcher stuff anymore, and I think Season 3 will be a decisive factor. Okay, I can barely speak anymore, so I'll leave you here. Do let me know how you feel about Blood Origin and potentially Season 3. And until the next video, thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members. Stay tuned and be good.